Hello, everyone, everybody here today. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to hold this webinar on MDR postponement. We will review what it brings to the sector, what are the challenges and what are the potential opportunities that we should consider from a regulatory point of view. So let's begin. Where do we stand with regards to transition period of the medical device regulation? Okay, so we are here. We are basically only a few days before 26th of May, which was the previous date of application of the MDR. And what has happened? As we know, due to the COVID-19 outbreak, the Commission decided to propose a postponement of this date of application. This proposal was finally accepted at the end of April. And basically the aims of this postponement are to ensure that the pressure on national authorities, notified bodies, manufacturers, and basically all relevant stakeholders is lowered so that they can focus on really urgent priorities, on medical devices that are really needed during this coronavirus crisis. So very important to take into account that the date of application is postponed for the medical devices regulation and not so for the in vitro diagnostic medical devices regulation, which is kept unchanged, May 2022. Okay, so that was the start. So at the start of this webinar, and the regulation 2020/561 is the one that will actually has all this the impact on this postponement. So the amendment regulation on the MDR. With regards to the impact of this amendment regulation, in general, we can say that basically almost all MDR requirements will become postponed for one more year. Basically, the date of application will be 26th of May 2021, and therefore most MDR requirements will start to become applicable from that date onwards. There are a few exceptions though. First, CE certificates under MDD terms will still be considered valid, of course, if not expired, only until May 2024. So this is the so-called grace period, and this grace period has not become further extended. It has remained, so the same limit date has been kept under this amendment. Then second, sell-off period remains also unchanged. So any stocks will be could be sold until May 2025. And this limit date, has also not become further extended. And a third exception would be that CE exemptions due to exceptional circumstances like the one that we are currently experiencing with the coronavirus crisis will be authorized by member states either under directives terms or regulations terms by virtue of Article 59 in MDR. So this is another exception, that there is one article in MDR that is already applicable, which is Article 59 for this CE exemptions or derogations of the conformity assessment procedures under exceptional circumstances. And one surprise, so to speak, because it was commented and even announced by the Commission that UDAMED would be launched in May 2022. That was something that was commented over last year. And this amending regulation defines that UDAMED should be launched in May 2021. So it will be launched in principle 1 year before the last informations. So this brings us to these new timelines where the date of application will be moved from 2020 to 2021, and so will UDAMED also be postponed to 2021. In addition to this amendment of the regulation, we need to take into account the correction that was published at the end of last year, the second corrigendum of the regulations, the one that was applying to the MDR, whereby there is, well, among other corrections, this one here, a correction 2.3 under Article 120, which says the grace period will be extended to class 1 medical devices that would become upclassified under MDR classification rules. So these class 1 medical devices can also be kept on the EU market without recertifying under MDR with notified body, as long as they are lawfully CE marked and placed on the market before, in the corrigendum text, before 26th of May 2020, now after the amendment, before 26th of May 2021. Okay, so the grace period due to this corrigendum is applicable to class 1 medical devices under MDD classification rules, and when read together with the amending regulation, will be applicable to any class 1 medical device self-certified under MDD terms from 26th of May 2021, the new date of application. So this is about the transition period. When we look at the stages of implementation, where are we? So one of the important points to look at is the stages of redesignation of notified bodies. If we take into account the MDR legal framework, so far we have 14 notified bodies that have been successful in this redesignation process. So you can see them on the slide, and you can retrieve them anytime from the NANDO website. Of these 14 notified bodies, 13 are in the EU, whereas 1 is in the UK, which is BSI UK. And by the way, BSI has already expressed that it will maintain the full scope, both for its UK as well as its Dutch, this type here, its Dutch company, for all codes, and both under the directive as well as the regulations, until at least the end of the Brexit transition period. So even BSI UK should be considered for CE certification still under MDD terms. And with regards to MDR redesignation of notified bodies, these are the two relevant legal texts. The one quite old now, where the terms for the designation and supervision of notified bodies are included, and later, quite recently, this document has been amended by the Commission, and basically this recent amendment, what it says is basically member states can also decide to renew MDD designations of notified bodies that could eventually expire during this extra time until the new date of application, basically in order to make sure that there might be no notified body shortages under these exceptional COVID crisis circumstances. So this is where basically this possibility is expressed, that member states can decide to renew these designations. So following the notified body situation, there's another point to look at, which is the guidelines that the medical device coordination groups are working on. And so far we have all of these here shown on this slide already published around several topics. Like UBI, we have 9 guidelines so far, UVMED 2 guidelines, the EMDR nomenclature 2 guidelines, 18 guidelines for notified bodies. On clinical aspects, we have 6 guidelines so far, some of them actually quite recently published. On new technologies, software, etc., we have 3 guidelines and 6 additional guidances on other miscellaneous topics. So this is quite a lot, but we are still awaiting a number of very much relevant guidelines in black, those that are relevant for medical devices under MDR, which are expected to become published still under during this year, during this current year. We have clinical guidances expected to become published, including the applicability of the clinical consultation procedure, which is actually under the notified bodies topic, but that because it of course pertains to clinical aspects of the conformity assessment procedure, we have listed here under the clinical topic. We are also expecting that the template on clinical evaluation assessment report becomes available soon. Also a guideline that will explain all the classification of medical devices under the new MDR classification rules, quite interesting, especially for new classification rules. Another one, which is expected to become published along this year, the legal status of app providers. And well, in gray, you see some guidances that are relevant for IVDs, which is out of the scope of today's webinar, but just for information. And in red, those guidances, those guidelines that, well, have no expected date yet. So the expected dates are to be defined, and quite relevant guidelines under this situation. For instance, post-market surveillance guidelines, all of them pending and with to be defined expected dates. The guideline for in-house manufacturers also expected to become published at some point, but we have no foreseen date either. The guideline under the new technology scope for artificial intelligence under MDR legal framework also to become published at some point, and the guideline on common specifications for products listed under Annex 16. Well, in this case, expected quite later on in 2021. So it needs to be noted that for some of these group of guidelines, even the task force that needs to work on them is not yet set up. So well, we will see if they are published sooner than later. Of course, we all hope so. And to follow with the status of implementation, a few words under standardization, because last week this document was published by the European Commission, whereby the CEN and CENELEC organizations are requested to work on three main lines to standardize all technical standards against MDR requirements by either adapting international standards to the new legal framework or reviewing and or updating existing harmonized standards to MDR requirements, and of course, where needed, where necessary, work and draft new standards according to these MDR requirements. With regards to the timelines for these MDR standards, it's quite important to note that most product-specific standards have a due date in 27 of May 2024. So in quite some time from now. However, these so much relevant overarching standards are due 26th of May this year. So in a few days' time. In quality management system for medical device manufacturers, risk assessment, clinical investigations, and labeling. And so we have to see these two legal milestones, this postponement of the date of application and the corrigendum in general, because they bring about some opportunities. First, of course, well, we already commented medical devices can still be CE certified under MDD terms in principle and theoretically, basically until the new date of application, and eventually with more more easily during this year and eventually during the first quarter of 2021. This, of course, will depend on the notified body's willingness in general and capabilities to take in these CE certification requests, but the possibility is there. Class 1 medical devices, due to the corrigendum that will become classified under MDR classification rules, could enjoy this grace period until 2024, theoretically. And the third point is more a challenge than an opportunity, but we need to take into account that, as we all know, medical device directive is less demanding in general than MDR, and more particularly in clinical requirements. So clinical data and clinical evaluation assessment demands, criteria to claim equivalence. In particular, with regards to the equivalence, there is a very recent MDCG guidelines on this. So quite a hot topic at the moment. And another one is we don't have this summary of safety and performance characteristics requirement under MDD as we have under MDR. So basically a lot more demanding from clinical aspects, the MDR than MDB. Another point is the post-market surveillance requirements that are much more demanding under MDR, whereby we need to have a post-market surveillance plan, a post-market clinical follow-up plan, And we need to prepare for drafting PSURs or PMSRs, depending on the risk class, etc. And also, last but not least, that for certain product types, MDD will also be particularly less demanding than MDR, either because the risk class is different or because there are additional requirements to look at under MDR that are not applicable under MDD. And those product types are substance-based medical devices, software medical devices, inhalers and drug device combinations, as we will see in a moment. So let's look a little bit more closely to these challenges and opportunities. When talking of classification rules under MDR, we need to recall that there are these 5 additional rules, special rules. Rule 11 is not special, belongs to the active, but it's quite absolutely new, applicable to standalone software. And then rules 19, 20, 21, and 22 are special rules. And well, so what opportunities are they bringing? And beyond classification rules, we have also added Annex 16 for these products that have no medical purpose, and in addition, Article 117 for the drug and device combinations. In particular, we want to focus on these 4 aspects or elements of the MDR: 3 rules, 3 classification rules, and Article 117. Let's look at substance-based medical devices first. Within this category, we have any formulation, any pharmaceutical formulation that fulfills the definition of medical device, and typically we can find eye drops or gels or oral sprays. And under MDR, these products, because they are a combination of substances that will be intended to be introduced into the human body via orifices or applied to the skin, and that will be absorbed or locally dispersed. So as you can see, based on Rule 21, their classifications are from 2A to above, to Class 3 basically. So this will be a main challenge for all these products from the new date of application onwards, or from as soon as the corresponding CE certificates under MDD terms expire. Okay, so a classification and new requirements including that the technical documentation of these products will have to include a module or a chapter with data on their admit tox characterizations and instructions. And these formulations might have in the body. In addition, for certain substance-based medical devices of the higher risk class, the conformity assessment procedure will include a consultation with a competent authority. So new requirements from a technical point of view, but also from a procedural point of view. So a lot more demanding for these products under MDR terms. When we look at software, the challenges are the following. Well, when we talk of software classified under Rule 11 of MDR, we talk of standalone software, so not to forget about. We are not talking of accessory software, so it's a standalone software that, as you can see, starts by being classified from the 2A risk class onwards, meaning at least 2A or above. There is an exception to this, whereby the same Rule 11 eventually can include some situations or cases where the classification is class 1, but this is generally considered to include in the future under MDR the list of the cases. So the majority of standalone software will be likely classified from this class risk onwards. In addition, technical requirements are many, as you can see here, and therefore, well, more stringent regulatory procedure. First, because there will be the need to undergo a conformity assessment procedure with a notified body, and also because from a technical point of view, there will be a lot to be compliant with, technically, clinically, etc. Let's look at another type of product, the inhalers, that will become classified by this special Rule 20 under MDR as either 2A or 2B. whereas now under MDD terms, these products are considered class 1. So a clear challenge here. So in terms of conformity assessment procedure, especially. And with regards to the last specific kind of product, drug-device combinations, here we need to make a distinction between integral drug-device combinations versus non-integral drug-device combinations. Where integral drug-device combinations mean products where the medicinal product and the device are physically integrated, whereas non-integral drug-device combinations obviously are not integrated physically, but are combined for administration. Okay, so in this category, we can find either co-packaged, combined products, but not integrally, physically integrated, or combined products that will be combined during the use or before the use, meaning the device is not provided in the package, but is referred in the instructions for use of both products to be used in combination with one another. With integral drug-device combinations, we talk of 2 different types of products. Devices that incorporate a medicinal product whereby the principal mode of action is exerted by the medicinal product, and therefore they are governed mainly by the medicinal product directive, and devices that physically integrated with the medicinal product with the intention to administer the medicinal product, and also governed by the medicinal product directive. For this, integral drug-device combinations in particular, Article 117 of the MDR applies. Here are only some examples of these 2 different kinds of drug-device combinations. And among the requirements of this Article 117 products, we find that first, device information needs to be included in specific subsections of Module 3.2p of the Marketing Authorization dossier of the medicinal product. So first requirement. And second, for devices that, if used independently, would be classified beyond class 1, therefore, in principle, would be subject to a CE certification with involvement of a notified body, and for which there is no CE certification, then marketing authorization applicants will need to undertake a notified body opinion, so a procedural requirement. So to wrap up, in interesting opportunities due to the challenges that products falling into this classification rules or under this article will have to face under MDR legal framework. Other challenges are general requirements under MDR, like clinical evaluation. We already commented briefly that, as we know, there will be a stronger focus on claim substantiation, clinical benefits, equivalence demonstration, risk-benefit profile. There will need to be a clinical evaluation plan, and there will need to be a summary of safety and performance characteristics for high-risk devices, in particular implantable and class 3 devices. With regards to post-market surveillance, we also refer to the plans of post-market surveillance and post-market clinical follow-up, PSURs, in addition, a more proactive approach for surveillance activities, and also a stricter reporting timelines for vigilance activities, so a lot more demanding legal framework. Okay, so this is one part of the story, but the other part of the story is whether notified bodies are willing to, well, open a window of possibilities for the sector in terms of CE certifications during this extra year time, and well, to have some information, as Valian sent a questionnaire to 37 notified bodies. Some of them were redesignated, some others are not yet redesignated or are not planning to become redesignated. So basically, we did a survey, and these are the answers. With regards to the question of whether they will certify or not under MDD, interestingly, 20 answers from the 37 notified bodies that were included in the survey said yes, we will take CE certification requests under MDD, which is, of course, the majority. but there is 30%, which is not neglectable, that said, no, we will not take in these requests. Reasons for saying no are manifold. They are not the resources. Their MDB redesignation is about to expire, which was before this document by the Commission published last week became available. So eventually, this percentage, 30%, might change if some notified bodies decide to request renewal of their MDB redesignations. And the 5% said, well, it depends. We will assess on a case-by-case basis, depending on our availability of assessors, etc. With regards to the limit date for these CE certification applications, so we have 15 answers among those that said yes to the first question, obviously. And here, interestingly, a 20% says, well, as soon as possible, we will set a limit date that will be as soon as possible, meaning in a few months' time, we will not accept new CE certification requests under MDB. That could be either before September or before end of the year. So this 20% is uncertain, but with this as soon as possible general answer. A 33% said around September this year will close this window, so quite soon. Some others, 20%, set the limit date around end of 2020, so end of this year, and there is 20%, 27% from non-answers. So this in general, well, suggests that the window is rather narrow, but still to take into account, of course. Then with regards to prioritization criteria, there we got many different answers here. Well, some said we will simply manage and process the request by order of arrival. Some others said low risk devices first, because principal conformity assessment will take well, shorter times. Obviously, the prioritization will be subject to NBOC codes, that is obvious. Another point would be the readiness of the client in terms of maturity of the regulatory documentation, also to streamline this conformity assessment procedure. The availability of assessors with regards to specific product types, technologies is also a point to take into account. And in general, all notified bodies will observe the recommendation by the Commission as to give priority to COVID-19 needed devices. So this is a general prioritization criteria in any case. This comes from 9 answers out of 37 notified bodies. So this is eventually less representative, but at least it gives an idea that there are mainly well, at least these aspects to consider. And the last question that was posed without much hope to get a clear answer: in how far would well, MDB criteria be applied strictly, or in how far could specific aspects of the technical documentation be assessed under like MDR, MDR-like criteria, meaning the clinical evaluation and what other critical aspects. But more particularly, the question was put with regards to the clinical evaluation module of the technical documentation. And well, here, of course, there was no surprise. 67% of the notified bodies said that obviously until the date of application, strict MDD criteria will be applied. But we all know that assessments are becoming more and more demanding. So this is the formal answer by the notified bodies, which could not be different. So this is what we know. What is what we don't know? There are still open questions around MDR, many more than those listed here, but these are only but a few. So one of them could be, how will the new MDR classification rules be applied, especially in unclear situations? With regards to this, we are awaiting this MDCG guideline with regards to MDR classification rules. And eventually this will answer the question, how will new requirements be assessed by the notified bodies, and how much more demanding will be the conformity assessment procedures under the new regulation, and which notified bodies will be taking in requests of opinion for device components of drug device combinations for Article 117. Not all of them need to agree with this request. So how many of them will be willing to do so? And how will the procedural aspects be defined? When will the pending MDCG guidelines become published, and how easy will they be to interpret and apply? Will the system be ready, including competent authorities and expert panels, very much especially for additional procedures? Will there be additional postponements for particular aspects like UDI, UDAMED, or others? There are many open questions still to become answered around MDR. And so to conclude, we would say there might be two main strategies, either to certify or recertify as soon as possible under MDP to take advantage of these lower classifications or lack of additional requirements, or take advantage of this extra year time to actually prepare for MDR requirements and for these foreseeably more stringent conformity assessment procedures. So this would be the two main strategies. And there's one last recommendation, that whatever strategy is chosen by each manufacturer, depending on the case, we should all take into account not to neglect our part in meeting the forthcoming MDR requirements. So the recommendation would be to stay on the safe side. And as Team NB was stating, also recently, basically medical device manufacturers and other relevant stakeholders should pursue their original plans for this transition period as much as possible under the given circumstances, and basically not relax. So this was what we wanted to share today. I would like to recall that following this webinar and as a last training session of Asphalian's spring online webinars, next Thursday, our general manager, Lidia Canovas, will give this last session on expedited regulatory pathways that we should not miss. And because we have quite a few minutes left, I would like to open now the turn of any questions that you may have. I'll try to answer them as best as I can. So I think there are already a few questions. Let's see. So one question is, do you think that device combination products shall have the same post-marketing surveillance and vigilance monitorization levels as devices, considering that device combination products will also be monitored under drug pharmacovigilance procedures? So that is a very good question. Yes, well, I think that it would be wise and it would be interesting that risk assessment of medical devices combined with medicinal products are integrated into risk management plans of medicinal products, so that any technical aspect of the device's design that could affect the safety of the medicinal product is taken into account during the lifetime of the combined product use. So I don't think that there should be exactly the same post-marketing surveillance and vigilance activities, but like a joint procedure whereby drug device combinations are taken care from this post-market perspective, and whereby medicinal product aspects as well as medical device aspects are both monitored. I mean, there needs to be some specific device monitoring during the post-marketing life of the drug device combination, which is specific to the device area. But I think it would be wise that a joint procedure for this post-market surveillance are developed for drug device combinations, like specific procedures. I don't think there is anything like this yet published. Another question is, class 1 non-sterile reusable surgical instruments will be placed on the market until May 2024 under MDD. So class 1, non-sterile reusable surgical instruments. Well, for reusable surgical instruments, there was a prioritization actually, because reusable, so any class 1 that can be reused or reprocessed needs to be CE certified with a notified body, so they do not fall under this class 1 extension of the grace period, you see, because they need a notified body in any case. Well, actually, notified bodies were giving priority, as I say, to this particular type of products. So they would eventually will be considered as any other medical device if the CE certificate is still in force and therefore not expired. Yes, they could be placed on the market until May 2024, like any other medical device, not because of their class 1 category, but because they might have become recertified under MDD terms before this date of application. Another question, under MDD, will all eye drops become class 2B? Good question. So we would need to look at Rule 21. So it depends on the degree of absorption of formulations. It is very likely that some absorption takes place when eye drops are instilled into the onto the surface of the eye, and so you always should apply a risk-based approach when classifying. So if there is the list of the possibilities that this substance or combination of substances becomes absorbed, then the answer would be yes, but not all eye drops necessarily, because Rule 21 starts classifying products with class 2A. So we would need to look at the specific case and look what data you have on absorption, for example. Another question is such as fixed, sorry, there's more. Is this, I think there's an incomplete question, such as fixative cream, for example, by, yeah, the last question I cannot answer because it's not complete. Cannot answer, sorry, if you want to write it down again. I cannot read the full question. I don't know if it wasn't written properly. Is there any more? Are there any more questions that you would like me to answer? So most of them are on classification aspects, and in this sense, as I said, there will be still this year an MDCG guideline published on MDR classification rules that we are all expecting, and that will probably bring a lot of light into all these doubts. And it's not always easy to classify devices. And I don't think there are more questions. So if this is everything, I would thank you again for your attention. And yes, I wish you a very nice afternoon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.